Welcome to the studio review for Chapter 5. In the JavaScript unit, we have this curriculum here on the left. You'll see all the different chapters. We are at the very bottom of this section on Chapter 5 where it says Studio Shuttle Launch. You're going to want to make sure you read through these instructions. They will tell you what it is you need to do, where you will find the code, and give you some helpful information along the way. So let's just start at the top. You should have already forked this repository, JavaScript projects, because you would have needed it for the exercises in this chapter. But when you click on this, it will take you to LaunchCode Education here, and you can see that this is their original repository. So you don't want to clone this directly. You want to go here where it says fork, click on that, and then it'll create your very own version. So I have one here and I renamed it a little bit. You don't need to do that. I just put review on the end. You can just fork it, give it the same name, JavaScript projects, and then you'll have your own copy of it here based in your own account. And then from there, that's where you go to this green button and come down here and get this URL copied to your clipboard. And then you can go to a terminal and actually clone it using the git clone command and put it in a directory where you want your projects to reside. Anywhere on your hard drive, just make sure you don't put it inside another Git repository because then you'll have problems. They need to be separate. I actually put mine here with all my studio review for my JavaScript unit, and you can see that the entire thing is right here, and then here's all the directories inside of it. When I open this in VS Code to start coding, I open the entire thing. And the reason for that is because, see, on my Mac, I can do Shift Command dot there, and I can see these hidden files. I see that .git file that's hidden. That tells me that this entire thing is the repository. I prefer to open things in VS Code in a lot of cases just from the root of that entire Git repository, so I can see everything in it at once. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. If we come over here, you can see I've got VS Code. This is the entire thing, JavaScript projects review. And I've got each of my folders, for all of these different chapters, the different topics that we're going to be covering. And under Booleans and conditionals, there's exercises and there's studio. These exercises you should have already done. And then the studio here is just a single file. And I double clicked on it so that it will stay put when I open it. Because if you only single click on it like this, you'll notice it's in italics. That's because you can kind of switch around and click on other files, and it doesn't permanently keep it up here on a tab unless you double click. So keep that in mind. Now it'll stay put. And they've got some comments here to kind of guide us through all of the different code that we're going to be adding. But really what we want to do is pay attention to the instructions. So let's go ahead and go back to the curriculum here, and we will take a look at the top. So it tells us that the activity is going to consist of 3 parts. The very first thing is initializing all of the variables that we need with different specifications about the shuttle. So we have everything from date and time to the number of astronauts to a bunch of different information about the mass of the astronauts, the fuel, the shuttle. We're going to have some information about the fuel and weather status. And then this very last one, prepared for liftoff. Are we ready? Are we not ready? Is the question that's being asked there. So that's the first part. Then the second part will be writing some conditional statements to check if the shuttle is meeting some of those requirements and if it's cleared. And so those are all defined here. We're going to take these one by one and we'll create a condition for each one to check all these numbers. And then at the very end, once we've determined whether we're clear to launch or not, we will either say no, we're not ready, and we're going to abort the launch, or we will put together all of this information into a little report and put that out to the console so it can be read, and it'll look something like this. Okay, so let's start at the top. We're going to start with these variables. For each of these, there's a whole big list of them, right? In professional practice, I would never really just do all of these all at once, because then it's a big block that's very difficult to read. If you come in and someone wants to try to find something, they have to read through the entire list. So I'm actually going to break it up a little bit. And these are the kinds of decisions that you make with your code. We have a little prompt here to say initialize the variables, but you can do it however you want. So I'm going to say I want to maybe just have those first two things, date and time, be part of the report info. So I could say let date equals, use that let keyword when you want to declare a new variable. And I'm just going to copy this right here to my clipboard and paste it in, but I need to put it in quotes because it's a string. And then I'll put a semicolon at the end. Okay, so this is basic JavaScript, let keyword, the name of the variable. The equals is the assignment operator because we are initializing it with this value, this string, and then the semicolon. Let's do the same thing with a time. I will copy this over and put this in here. Okay, and I have some extra spaces there, so let me fix that. Good, okay. And now I'm going to have another section. I just want to, again, divide these up a little bit. So I'm going to say let astronaut count equal, and how many did they say? 7, okay. And they also have an astronaut status, which is ready. Okay, now this is going to be a number, 7, but when we do astronaut status, we're back to a string. Okay. So those two are good. Now we have a bunch of information that has to do with mass in kilograms. The astronaut, the crew, calculating that, depending on how many astronauts we have, we can multiply that average and get the total crew mass. Then the fuel mass, the shuttle mass, and then calculating the total of all of those, crew, fuel, and shuttle. So let's put all these together, and also this maximum mass limit that tells us, we can only handle so much mass or else we won't be able to take off. So this is going to be our limit. Let's do these one at a time, and I'm going to put all of these in another section because they are all the variables related to the mass calculations. Okay, so I'll start with the average astronaut mass kilograms here and put that in. And we're going to say 80.7. That's another number. And then the crew mass kilograms we said was going to be the astronaut count times the average astronaut mass kilograms. Notice how as I'm typing this in, VS Code is suggesting these. I'm going to hit the tab button and complete it. And that saves me a lot of time. It's going to take you a little bit of practice to get real fluent with doing this, but you will, and I promise it will make your life easier. So keep practicing. All right, the next one is the fuel mass at 760,000. So I'll say let fuel mass kilograms equal 760,000. We do not put commas in. JavaScript does not know how to read commas, so we leave that comma out of there. Okay, the shuttle mass kilogram is going to be this incredibly strange number, so I will, not a nice round number, is it? So I'm going to go ahead and grab it, and I'll say shuttle mass kilogram equals 74,842.31. All right. Now we can take the total. We can add up those three. So I'll declare a new variable, total mass kilogram, and add these up. Fuel mass kilogram plus shuttle mass kilogram. Okay. And then we have the maximum mass limit, which is 850,000. All right, let maximum mass limit equal 850,000. Okay, and notice I'm paying attention to the names they already provided. They give us the variable names here. You will have other assignments where they, pretty much just let you decide how to name things. But since they provided these specific names, that's what I'm using. All right, that's it for mass. Now we can do 4 more that are related to the fuel. We've got the fuel temp Celsius, which is negative 225. So let's do a new section here. Fuel temp Celsius is negative 225. We'll let the minimum fuel temp and the maximum fuel temp be negative 300 and negative 150 respectively. So minimum fuel temp is negative 300. And let maximum fuel temp be negative 150. Okay. Last one is the fuel level itself. It says it's at 100%. Now, JavaScript does not really have a special way for you to indicate percentages. Instead, we need to track it one of two ways. We either need to say we're just going to go from 0 to 1 because anything less than 1 is a percentage of 1, or we're going to go from 0 to 100. It really does not matter what you do as long as you're consistent throughout your entire application. So I'm going to choose one. And in my case, I'm going to choose to do it the typical mathematical way, which is to just use a scale of 0 to 1. But, I'm going to make a comment here that represents 100%. And then when we go to do some logic later, we will remember, that we have set this on a scale of 0 to 1, and that's what we'll check against. Okay, so we've got a couple more here. We've got the weather and the liftoff status. Okay, so let's do the weather. And I'll say let weather status equal clear. That's going to be the default value there that we set. And then we're going to track this status for lifting off. And so I'm just going to make a little note here, and we'll say let prepared for liftoff be, oops, no quotes. Okay, so this is not a string. This is actually a Boolean. It's either true or false. And we're going to set it to true initially and say we're going to be under the assumption that we're ready to go until we start doing the checks of everything. Are the astronauts ready? Is the mass low enough? Is the fuel temperature okay? Et cetera, et cetera. And then we can check each of these things and say, do we need to set this to false, or can we leave it as true? And then when we get to the very end, we'll check it and say, okay, is it still true? Or have we changed it to false somewhere along the way? And if so, that's going to determine what we do at the very, very end. So we just start by declaring this variable as true by default so that we can work with it and track, on all of these different things, are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? And it'll stay true unless we come across something where we say, nope, we're not ready. And then we can change it to false. Okay, so that's our variables. Let's go take a look at what the requirements are here for these conditional statements. There are 6 different things here that they want us to do. The first one is to check and see if the astronaut count is greater than 7. If it's greater than 7, we have a problem and we're not going to be ready. So I'm going to check for that case. I'm going to say, if it's a problem, then we're going to set prepared for liftoff to false. So when you're making decisions about conditionals, you can set it up, if some condition, and then you'll have the code inside here that's supposed to execute. And in this case, I'm going to say, I want to go, to this variable that we declared up here and just say prepared for liftoff is going to be set to false, which is going to be different than its initial value. So we need to have the condition that would make it false, not the condition that would make it true. So it's going to be fine if it's up to 7, but if it's greater than 7, that's where we have a problem. So let's set this to astronaut count greater than 7 and say, if the astronaut count is greater than 7, then we want to set prepared for liftoff to false. And that should take care of that. Okay, so we can test it. I'm just going to come down here to the very end because this is going to be a temporary thing that we do. I'm going to just put a little note here. This is a temporary check. And we'll just use a console log to print something to the console where we can see the result and just check that value of prepared for liftoff because we don't have any other way of telling right now. And we'll check our work and make sure it's okay. So right now it's set to 7, which means when we get here, we would expect that this expression right here, this Boolean expression, would evaluate to false, which means this line of code should not execute. And what we expect is that it's still going to hold the value of true, and we haven't changed it. So you notice here that I have already come into, from the JavaScript project review directory, I used a CD command, change directory, to go to Booleans and conditionals /studio. So if I do an ls here, you can see I've got this file right here because I'm in this directory. So I can go ahead and just use the node command to run this, and we get true. So as expected, prepared for liftoff is still true because we only have 7 astronauts. So let's test the opposite of that. Let's say, what happens if we actually had 9 astronauts? Is this going to be false now? And it's false. So we know that our logic is working. Everything we did here is working, and it's changing this to false because this expression right here evaluated to true because 9 is greater than 7. Okay, let me change it back just so we can put it back to something that works, and then we'll be able to test the next one. Okay, so the next one is just, are the astronauts ready? And the default value they had us do was ready. So that's what we're going to be working with initially. But we're just going to say if they're not ready, then we need to set prepared for liftoff to false. So we'll say astronaut status. I'm going to hit the down key here and hit tab. There we go. If the astronaut status is not equal, so bang equal is that not equal operator. If it's not equal to ready, then we need to say that prepared for liftoff needs to be false. Okay, if I run it right now, we're going to expect it to be true because it is ready, right? But if we come up here and we change this and say, not ready, and we run it again, now we see it's false. So our code is working. Let me undo that. The code that we set here is working. It's changing it to false whenever it's not ready. Okay. The next one is going to be the total mass kilogram. We just have to make sure that it hasn't exceeded this limit that's saved. And I see that there's a typo here. It says 85,000. It's meant to be 850,000. So we're going to use this number up here. That is actually the correct number. Okay, so we'll do this one and say if the total mass kilogram is greater than the maximum mass limit, then we have a problem. So we're going to set prepared for liftoff to false. Okay, we can test this. Currently, we do not have a problem. It's returning true. It's not executing that code. But if we were to come up here and say, what if this was, 800,000 instead of 760? We could try this again. And now it's false because it exceeded that number that's stored in maximum mass limit. And that's what we're comparing against. We're comparing these two, right? Let me change that back. Okay. So it looks like we're good to go as long as we use the original numbers. Let's go ahead and do the next one. The next one asks, is the fuel temp Celsius in range, right? It needs to be greater than negative 300, but it needs to be less than negative 150. So we can actually do one single statement using a logical operator for or that will allow us to do this all in one conditional statement. So let's take a look at this. We start here and we basically want to say, if one is the true or if the other one is true. So we can say, if the fuel temp Celsius is less than the minimum fuel temp, or if fuel temp Celsius is greater than the maximum, if either one of those things is true, then we have a problem. So we're going to have to set this to false. We're not prepared. All right, let's run it. We can see that right now, prepared for liftoff is true. What if I was to change it from negative 225 to negative 325? That should trigger it on the basis of this first one because now it is, in fact, less than the minimum. And so this should be false. And it is. We have false. Okay, what if I do the opposite? What if I do negative 125, which is actually higher than the maximum? I can run it again. And this time it actually, this one was true, but this one here was not. And so, excuse me, I said that backwards. This one was false, but it checked this one and this one was true, which means, it's out of range. We have a problem. So because this one, we have this or here, as long as one of these two things is true, then that means that it's going to execute this code. So it's setting it to false. So all I have to do now is set it back to the original negative 225, and we run it again, and it's back to true. Everything's within range. Okay. Is the fuel level at 100%? There's a couple ways you could do this. You could, check it to be exactly 100, or you could just make sure that it's no less than 100. Whichever way you choose to do it, you essentially just want to make sure. So fuel level, that you're comparing it to either 1 or 100. So you remember I used 1 to represent 100%. That means I need to compare it to 1 and not to 100. So I'm going to just check that. Is it less than 100%, less than 1? If so, prepared for liftoff needs to be false. Okay, so we can check the positive case and it's still true because the fuel level's 1. What if we change it to something less than 1? What if we say 80%, right? 0.8. If we run that again, then it should trigger it. Yes, and now it's changed it to false. All right, let me change it back. Okay, so we have another one that's working. Our last one is the weather status being clear. So basically, if it's anything other than clear, we're going to say we're not prepared for liftoff. So I'm just going to say if the weather status is not clear. And it doesn't matter what it is. We don't need to know what any other condition would be. The only one we really are watching for is clear. And if it's not clear, we're going to say that prepared for liftoff is false. Okay. So we can test that. And right now it's true because it's clear. Let's say it's stormy. That would be one value that is not clear. So we could check that. And sure enough, we get false. So everything is working so far. This is good. I'll change it back to clear. All right. So this was temporary, right? I was just, logging the value of that Boolean prepared for liftoff just so I could see what its value was as we were testing each of these individually, because it's a good idea to test your code as you go along. But now we need to do something different. We're not going to just log that value. We're going to print something different where if we are prepared for takeoff, if that comes back at true after passing all of those checks that we put in place, then we're going to print out this output. If it's not true, then we want to abort the launch. So we just need to set up a binary if-else statement here. So I'm going to say if one thing is true, execute the code in this body. Otherwise, execute code in this body. And what we're checking for, of course, is if prepared for liftoff is true. You could actually check it with the equals equality operator here for the Boolean value true. However, you may remember that if a variable itself is already a Boolean, it has a value of true or false, it evaluates the true or false all by itself. So we can actually leave this off and just say if prepared for liftoff. And if it's true, then this code right here is going to execute. So this would be where we print the report. If it's not true, then this block of code is going to execute and we can, abort the launch. So we can do this one right now and just say, launch aborted, right? And we'll just print that out. We're not going to print the full report if we're not ready. But if we are, let's go ahead and see how we might go about printing the report that they want us to work on here. So we're going to need to basically do a readout of a bunch of these numbers and the information that was provided, but we're going to format it kind of nicely. We're going to have this sentence at the beginning and a little sentence at the end and these dashed lines in between. So when we get to chapter 7, you're going to learn how to do template literals and put this kind of all-in-one console log statement in a nice, clean way. But we haven't really covered that yet. So right now, we're just going to use a series of console log statements, one after the other, to do each of these lines. And that's perfectly fine for now. So here, I'm going to start with that first sentence and just say, I want to print all systems are go, initiating space shuttle launch sequence. So let me type that up. All systems are go, initiating space shuttle launch sequence. Okay. There we go. And then we want this dotted line. I'm essentially just going to make it out of hyphens. And I'm going to make it exactly as long as the sentence. It'll look nice. So I'll go all the way to here and then tack on that semicolon. And now it's going to be the same length as this. So it'll look good. And then after that, we're going to start actually reading out all the different information, the date, the time, the astronaut count. We'll do these one at a time, but we're going to use our variables to do it. So we're going to need to do something called concatenation, where first we can, put the label on here, and I need to put a space inside that string. And then I use the concatenation operator, which is a plus sign for strings, that allows me to put together, strings, two different strings. And so I can just refer to the date that is, this variable we created up here with this information that's been stored. And it's just going to concatenate those two together. And we will have both of them on one line, just like that. We can do the same thing for the time. And then when we get to the next one, the astronaut count, we're dealing with number, which means that it's going to, let's see, console.log. It's going to take that number and it's going to tack it on with a string. So let's say astronaut count and do that. And then just put it together here with astronaut count and go get that value. Let's go ahead and run this right now just to make sure that everything we're doing so far is coming out as expected. So yeah, we're getting a nice printout here. All systems are go, and everything's got nice spaces between it. And so far, so good. We're doing good. Okay, let's go ahead and do this mass, the crew, the fuel, the shuttle, and total mass. We've got 4 of those in a row that we're going to do. One thing I want to draw your attention to is that they actually do have a label here on the end for kilograms for all 4 of those. So we need to do that. I'm going to do another console.log and say the crew mass, we'll do that one first. And say crew mass kilograms, and then do another concatenation. I'll put another space in here and put kg, and that should be the entire thing. And we'll do the same thing for fuel mass kilograms plus space kg. Okay, and I can actually, just copy this down, right, and do the same thing for shuttle and for the total. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and run this. Just make sure we're getting these numbers as expected. Yeah, it looks good, right? We have spaces before the numbers and after the numbers, those labels on the end. It's looking good. Okay, the next one is the fuel temperature in Celsius, and you'll notice that they have degrees Celsius. Now, depending on what operating system you're on, you'll have to Google how to do a degree symbol. And I believe I remember how to do it for a Mac. So let's give this a try. I'm going to do console.log and just say fuel temperature. There we go. And I'll say fuel temp Celsius. And then I'm going to add on a space and yeah, there we go. Okay, so on a Mac, it's Shift Option 8 to get the degree symbol, and then a C. And that'll be the end of that one. And then we'll do the weather. It was the very last one. And we don't need a label after that. We can just say what it is, clear, right? Okay. And then another dotted line, and then one last closing little sentence there. I can copy this from line 65 if I would like to here, and just put another line there. You also may have chosen to do the route of saving this dashed line in a variable, and then just console logging that variable twice, which is also valid. Since it's only 2 times, I'm not going to worry about it. If I was using it a whole bunch of times, I would definitely save it in a variable instead of having to just hard code it over and over again. Okay, last sentence is console.log, have a safe trip astronauts. Okay, let's run this. So all systems are go, initiating space shuttle launch sequence. And then it prints out all the information for us. It looks good, and then says, have a safe trip, astronauts. And it looks pretty much just like this. Just reads out a little differently in my console, but that's okay. Every console is going to look a little different. Let's do the other case. Let's test a couple things, right? Because right now, all of our values are meaning that all of these conditionals we wrote here in the middle are not executing. So it's never turning it false. Let's make it turn false. Let's say we have 9 astronauts, for example, and just make sure we want to test that this logic here is working to where if prepared for liftoff is not true, instead of executing this body, it executes this one instead and gives us this launch aborted. So let's run it. And we see that launch aborted. Okay, change this back to 7. That is the studio, guys. If you had any issues with this long way, just you're new at the syntax, you're new at just about everything. So just look over your syntax, make sure that you have all the parentheses and brackets lined up the way you're supposed to, and just for the sake of readability, make sure you're indenting anything that's inside one of these code blocks, put semicolons on the ends of things. If you want to do like I did and separate these out so it's easier to kind of find what you're looking for, that's always a good idea. Your teaching assistants will certainly appreciate it because they're going to be coming and looking at your code sometimes, and it will help them if you have nice, clean code. And then this last thing here, we just had this final logic where we're just checking that value of the same exact thing that we were possibly changing every time, and then we're evaluating it at the very, very end. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. I will see you in the next one.